way you're gonna hold me down. I said, I'm going gray in Tinseltown.
You're a beast.
There's no way you're gonna hold me down, 'cause I was born to entertain, and
Show them
you
what a real woman
can't
looks
take
like.
that away. I'm going gray all in your face. You can't replace this. It's going down, we're going gray in Tinseltown.
Hi, welcome to Going Gray in Tinseltown. I'm your host, Mandy Mae Cheatham. Today's guest is Nancy Nigrosh. She has had an incredible career. She has been a literary agent at both Gersh and Innovative. She was the head of the lit department at Gersh Talent Agency. She repped Oscar winner Catherine Bigelow, and she's had an extraordinary life. I got so caught up in the interview that we talked for 2 hours. I thought about editing it down, but we just discard women's stories too easily, don't we? So perhaps the way that we're going to actually make change is by holding space and having respect for women's stories. And I wanted to record this oral history in its entirety. Now I edited some things, but I left most of it intact because I just think that it's important for us to create that history for ourselves and speak about what it's like to be in your 60s at this particular time, and at your 40s at this particular time, and in your 20s at this particular time, when I think we're on the precipice of some major change in terms of the way women are valued in our society. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Trust me, it's worth it to listen all the way to the end. Here we go. How do I pronounce your last name?
Nigrosh.
Nigrosh. Where's
Yeah.
it from?
Poland. When my great-grandfather came to Ellis Island, he didn't speak any English. He spoke 5 other European languages, and he actually was coming from France. He had fled Warsaw because there was a pogrom, and he had started a new business that was in its infancy, which is corrugated cardboard.
Yeah.
And which people started making by hand, and then successfully he started employing more people, and had a workspace that got bigger and bigger until finally someone said, "Oh, let's take that new thing from that Jew who did that thing," and so he fled. And he was in Paris and also started the cardboard, started again to do the same thing in Paris. And his son, that was my great-great-grandfather. My great-grandfather said, let's go to America. There's a lot more going on with cardboard in America. And my great-great-grandfather said, no, I'm a European. I'll stay here. And then my great-grandfather said, well, fine, I'm going. To catching the boat to America and to New York. Anyway, when he got to Ellis Island and they asked him his name, he didn't speak English. So he kept saying Nigrosh, because he thought he'd have to pay customs or there would be some kind of a landing fee. Nigroshi is the smallest denomination of Polish money. So Nigrosh means pas de sous, not a penny. I don't have anything for you. So they wrote that down as his name. So it's not a real name. And it's only my family that has this name.
That's cool.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never thought about it being cool. It's just the family story.
But also, when you go to a new place, speaking of identity, and how much of your identity is put upon you and how much of it is determined, and that's an instance of something being put upon you.
Clerical. It was determined clerically.
Yeah. A misinterpretation of something that has now become, wow, I'm glad I recorded that story. So, Nigrosh.
Oh.
Nigrosh.
Again.
What is my problem with that? I have a real problem with people's names. I get anxiety about mispronouncing it and then mispronounce it in the worst possible way.
People mispronounce it all the time. I get mail where it's misspelled every conceivable way it can be misspelled. And I was going to say something else about identity, and now I've forgotten.
Because
how identity is imposed on you, and as I did start to explain, through clerical error of my great grandfather's name, it's Nigrosh. So it's whatever the powers that be impose something on you. He could have changed it, but it would be such a problem to change it that it became the family name. At one point, during my first marriage, when I was first married, I couldn't wait to get rid of this name. It's like we like to get new things and redecorate and, reimagine all kinds of things in our appearance. We go through phases of thinking we might look better this way or that. I thought I would look better as Nancy Blaylock. My husband's name was Blaylock. And so I, had to go through a legal name change and suddenly had this shiny new name that I thought was a better name than Nigrosh because it was easy to spell, it was easy to pronounce, easy to remember, I thought. But here's the huge mistake I made. In Hollywood, it is, as Neil Gabler said in his book, An Empire of Their Own, How the Jews Created Hollywood, suddenly had this waspy name instead of my real name and identity as a Jew, which would have been an advantage, just like it's an advantage in other businesses, culturally an advantage that I would have shared, but instead suddenly I was perceived to be this shiksa. So it's, and then when I went out of that marriage, one of the most joyous moments among the many joyous moments of getting out of this marriage, I got a letter from the state of California restoring my name to me.
Oh, wow.
And getting that name back. And then I was working for 3 men who were very uneasy about the fact that I was changing my name. I had built a reputation with that married name. In fact, at one point, I thought maybe I would open up my own business and it would have had that name that I would have had to carry potentially for a business reason. So I had to assert myself quite a bit about the fact that I was changing my name and I was going to keep my original name. And a lot of people actually in the business resented this, that, I have to remember this name, this other name, when I know you as this name. So it was a bit of a rocky road. And I also had other women say to me, why did you do that?
It's like Prince when he changed his name.
Yeah, well, not exactly. But other women said to me, they kept the married name even though they didn't want to, because at that point I didn't have children. There was maybe that component to it too. But the idea was, if you established your professional presence and your career under a certain name, it would only be common sense to keep it. So I checked common sense, and I used to sign all my letters, formerly Blaylock, underneath my name, until finally somebody, tapped me on the shoulder and started calling me formerly.
Oh, that's
I did
funny.
that for 2 years until everybody learned the new name.
Right.
The new name, which was the old original
That's smart,
name.
but also transitional, I guess. Isn't that so interesting? You build a career. Like, what an investment is marriage anyway? And then you're also investing in this new identity for yourself. And when it doesn't continue through the next phase of your life, then suddenly you have to disengage with also yourself, not only the marriage, but like yourself.
Well, and the self that I had become, I had really magnified that name, which was helpful to him in his career.
Sure.
Through my effort.
Yeah.
And it's hard to speak about this in that sense because, not that I care about hurting his feelings, which I don't, honestly. Honestly, everybody, I don't care about it. At the same time, he has privacy too. I guess it's that I was the breadwinner, and so I was the one that really magnified that name. And then I didn't want it because I realized it's me. It's me that's magnifying it, not the persona that I had become using that name. But taking my name back was incredibly empowering at that particular moment, and asserting my success in my career, and not for him to think, behave, or project that success really was because of my being married to him, which was completely the other way around. So,
And yet the name that you were trying to get rid of was your like a male patronage name as well.
Male
right?
patronage, and I think also, it was the opposite of the shiksa. I don't know what the male version of the shiksa is, but that idea of, I think, and I have to own this, to be less Jewish or to be not Jewish, that name, which is hard to say that. It's hard to admit that, but it's true. There are things that we think are going to make us better or more attractive that we're, and in fact, we're betraying ourselves. And we believe that having some other quality, whether it's your hair or it's plastic surgery or just other things that you do in your public presentation, that you think are going to make you more acceptable, which really was not. And ironically, in Hollywood, it didn't make me more acceptable. But the girl that I was from Boston, inside that woman who was establishing her career in Hollywood, she believed that it would make her more acceptable.
Right. Oh, man, so much to unpack in terms of identity because it's so layered. And the more that I am facing it, first facing my hair and now facing my face, because as soon as I stopped dyeing my hair, my neurosis went immediately to my skin and my skin aging. And I was like, stopped it. I'm working on stopping it and like interrupting that pattern all the time with like, I am a self that is not my identity. But what I think is really interesting and what I hope we can dig into today is all of the stories that are connected to the entertainment industry and LA, Hollywood, and the stories that are sort of these pervasive, underlying, subtextual stories that everyone kind of buys into, whether they're spoken or not, starting with you're going to get discovered at a soda pop factory, or whatever it was, a soda shop, all the way to, the audience doesn't want that type of story, or, I find that so pervasive. So how we are constantly trying to recreate ourselves to fit into this ever-changing, elusive.
I don't think it isn't ever changing. I think it's the same. I think it's probably the same since the silent era, where a lot of the women that starred in those movies were teenagers. So, it is about the teenage girl who, basically, if you go back to the caveman era, you keep, the thing that is fertility, a fertile young girl, most of people didn't live as long as they did now, but the idea of, the younger the better, the more healthy, the more children that you'll have. Even though that sounds absurd now in the modern era, but I think that there are things that still, like our lizard brains are still actively influencing us. So in Hollywood, that idea of being, as young as possible and looking as fertile and fuckable as possible is still the same ideal. I don't think that has actually evolved one iota or changed it in any way.
And do you think that culturally in other parts of the world, now we're so global that it's hard to disconnect from those things, but back when Hollywood was starting, I wonder if it was the same in the UK or in France or in China, or, it seems to me like the stories that I've heard about Eastern culture, for example, is that there's always been more reverence for wisdom and history. And, but what is it about?
Not necessarily for women. Women had to bind their feet in China to look like children and stay immobile, and maybe in a worshipful pose, and men could do anything. The influence of cinema from Asia or Europe hardly had the same kind of impact that Hollywood did. So those archetypes, I think, impact, even though those countries maintain their own national cinema and artists from those places, but the impact, the global impact, the thing that created these iconic ideas of a Hollywood whatever, use Hollywood as an adjective, we all know what those things mean. All of us do, since it started.
And even more deeply, part of this project for me is looking back into the canon of fine art. I was reading this book, Cleopatra's Memoirs, and it's a modern day historical fictionalized novel. But I thought it was so clever what the author did. Caesar had sent Cleopatra mosaic of Venus, and she was having it installed in the palace, and she said to her her girlfriend, she's like, "Oh, look at how beautiful she is. It's just impossible to live up to that standard."
Yes, because women look in the mirror. I think this is an aphorism that someone said to me. You know, women look in the mirror. They don't see someone who is attractive. All women think that they're unattractive. All men think they're attractive. I'm sure Caesar never bothered to compare how he looked to any other image or person. He saw himself as a powerful person, and was able to get in touch with that power, and as a result, become more than influential in his role at the time as a general, as a consul general, consul general, and emperor, and God.
Why do you think women aren't allowed to form their identity based on their achievements or their career? Why?
Because their achievements, the only achievements that women have traditionally been valued for in virtually every culture, and I'm going so far as out on a limb to be an authority, and this is all, the breadth of my knowledge is what it is, which some people call extensive, and other people would say, you hardly scratched the surface, is that women's accomplishments have always been tied to how much she helps her husband and also the success of her children. So the success of your husband, and your contribution to that success is highly praised. And if your children succeed in some way that everybody can agree on is success, you're highly praised. But if your husband fails, you were a bad wife. And if your children fail, you were a bad mother.
Wow. I have never thought of it that way, although I know that I have been conditioned and always had a fantasy of, being the woman that stands behind the man. Even though I've never behaved that way in my life, I always had this, Jackie O kind of fantasy. But when you say that also about the child having a son, and there's always this disruption for me when someone asks me what my son does. And he is very happy with his life, and he's 26 and he's doing his thing and what have you, but I feel
my daughter is 26 and has also a non-traditional road. Everybody assumes, she must be in law school or something. She's your daughter, and I'm like, no, that's not that was not her choice. Yeah. So and then all those cliches of what is valued for a child to be successful, or for a husband or a partner to be successful, are always in material terms, or about being influential in some fashion. It's not the accomplishments that you're allowed to have are very narrow. You're allowed to be a good student in school. You're allowed to be pretty. You're allowed to be competitively pretty when measured against other women. And then it really narrows down once you get married. Then everything that you do is defined by how successful your husband is. And good for you if he's successful, because you must have helped with that. And if that's not the case, and you made a poor choice, which is entirely possible, to marry someone for the wrong reasons, as I can tell you on husband number 3, and finally got it right. But other relationships that were like marriages where I didn't make good decisions about that, for the reasons that women don't make good decisions. They really are influenced, I think, in so many ways by their families, by our culture, by their education, to not make the best decisions when it comes to marriage and other things too.
To be chosen, I think, is the story.
Yes, to be chosen by a person who appears in whatever the world of that moment is, to have some level of status. That, the name that I already, that there was some status there, not just the WASP thing, which is part of Hollywood. Hollywood, though created and run by Jews, the actors were, for them, or even if they weren't WASPs, portrayed that as the highest level of the highest strata of society. People who had the most wealth or influence were, those were the characters we really liked. And sometimes they were allowed to be shallow and to be villains. And there was a lesser blessed person who might be your main character, but that person always looked non-ethnic and portrayed a certain kind of standard of attractiveness that to this day, I want to say that it has slightly changed, and some people fell outside of those categories that were the exceptions. And I do think for so many different reasons it's changing, but it's still there. I see it all the time. You especially see it in commercials. In commercials, the glorification of a certain kind of body and a certain kind of looking person.
I did a lot of commercial work in my early career. Well, not that I'm not deep into it, 7 years in, but that definitely, I think, contributed to the neurosis that I'm now facing about my hair and my look. And I was playing moms right away, but the mom was like, she had a couple of different things to offer. She could love her child, love her husband, or be slightly annoyed yet still love him. And the men that I was partnered with always were schlubby men and, super cute, perfect children. And so I had this idea when I went into an audition, I always had to look the same way. And I think, strangely, working in commercials, although it taught me a lot about taking terrible direction and being really quick to make adjustments, I think that it interfered deeply with my work as an artist, as an actress, because once I created this shell around myself that I needed to present a certain way to camera and had to have hair and makeup and all that stuff perfect, it was really difficult for me to meet the character if the character was not beautiful inside or outside. And I couldn't get past this sort of barrier that I thought was just a given at every single audition and, every meeting with everyone, that I had to be fuckable in order to even get seen. And then after that, then try to completely dismantle this armor in order to do the work, which is crippling. For so many actresses and actors, but actresses in particular have a real problem with this.
I think all women in their workplaces have a lot of problems.
Really?
But when you were saying that, the portrayal of the attractive, fuckable wife makes him a more successful character. And, he's a winner because he bagged you. Look at you. And everything is perfect, which really is, I thought you were going to say, you would talk about which makes you look and feel more shallow. And then I think also men typically marry women that are attractive or compete for them because then they'll have these beautiful, perfect children like you have in the ad, which makes them winners. And basically you're a breeder because his genes aren't so great, but yours are.
Right. Fuck. What I'm really interested in is, how many years have you worked in entertainment?
I went to film school, so, and I really did it on a lark. I wasn't really that serious about it, but because just the anthropology department sucked that I thought I was going to be, pursue my life's work in. So I went to film school at NYU, and I didn't take it that seriously. I didn't like being on a set. I didn't like all of the things I was supposed to learn, because I just didn't have an affinity for any of it, except two areas that I was interested in, which was, writing and film editing, which is solitary activity. And, and you can be very creative and there's no one there to stop you or change what you're trying to do in any way. But I got a job when I was still a student working on a film called Mean Streets, which was the second really feature film of a former professor at NYU who had gotten his MFA there, Martin Scorsese. So I worked as the New York location script supervisor for 10 days. And it was an incredible experience. I've written about it. And so working on a professional film set with real actors, even though they were unknowns at that point. Robert De Niro had been in a couple of movies, but no one knew him generally. These weren't household names. These were people who were, New York actors. And it was the beginning of all of that for their careers. That atmosphere changed everything for me. It was really a portal to think maybe this is going to be my road and this is what I'll be doing. And then I got into a master writing class at NYU with Terry Southern, even though I was an undergraduate. And Terry Southern had written Dr. Strangelove and Easy Rider. He'd been nominated for an Academy Award. And I've written about this a little bit too, that he read some of my work and talked to me and told me, "You're talented. You should go to LA." And I had never considered that ever. I mean, why would I go there? I'd only seen LA on television, and it looked like nothing like a place I would ever actually want to go to. And I knew there were, people were filmmakers in New York. Never occurred to me. And he, without my permission or knowledge, wrote a letter to UCLA, to somebody in the film program there, and said, I have a really talented student, blah, blah. And then evidently the person communicated back, well, then have her apply. I don't think it's just a process. So I did. And he said, "I'll write a letter for you, another letter for you." And he did. And I got accepted. So that became my road to come here. And the fact that I had worked on Mean Streets, and the fact that I had Terry Southern as my mentor, because he and I ended up co-writing a script together, which I had no idea was going to take 2 years of writing the script over the U.S. mail, because he was in Connecticut. Because I had done those two things, I was suddenly in this space with other people who had gone to NYU, who are now in the AFI. There was this little nexus of 70s little, film school kindergarten kids, and I was one of those kids, and that's what got me here.
So what has it been like starting in that space in the 70s?
I was a student, so I did have to make. I was in an MFA program, so I had to make another short film, and I had made at NYU. I had made short films there too, and then edit them. I ended up was not in the mainstream of the business, although a lot of the AFI kids were working on. Some of them worked on Orson Welles' film Fake. Other people worked on some more professional productions. I was like ahead of everybody because I'd worked on a real movie that came out and won the prize at Cannes. But I wasn't really in the business until I started. Somebody asked me to edit because I evidently people saw the edits that I made, thought they were good. So I was hired to do a PBS series, and I worked as an assistant editor in another feature. So I was really in the. Yes, I was like touching Hollywood while I was living in Los Angeles, but I was really pretty much on the periphery until I started reading as a reader. And then through an acquaintance, somebody asked me to read something, and I went to girls' Latin school. I knew how to summarize literary material, and I knew how to present it back and analyze the quality of the writing, and it was very natural to me. So people started asking for me as a reader. So that's how I started. But I always felt like I was still, at this basic level of entree, and everybody was struggling to move up and get recognized for whatever they could contribute. And more I could see that I was ostensibly I was in the writing program and supposed to be a writer, but I found writing to be lonely. I didn't like being isolated. I was in my 20s. I wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And I found it just not a natural thing to do. So I met a literary agent, and this was but by this point, it was the late 70s. I want to say 1979 even. 80, I met a literary agent at a dinner party who started telling me about her job, and I thought, I am perfect for that job. People had very negative ideas about what agents did, and still do. But I thought, I don't care. That's a good job for me to do. So I ended up at another dinner party in another situation mentioning that this was a goal of mine. And there was somebody who was an agent there who said, my assistant's going on vacation for 2 weeks. Let's see if you really want to do this. And you can sub for her for 2 weeks and see if this really is what you want to do. And just long story very short, I worked on that desk for 2 weeks, and from the moment I did, we had these headsets, and agents would dictate into a dictaphone what the deal was that they had just made, and then you'd play it. You'd have this little playback machine with a foot pedal, and you'd type the terms of it. And anyway, it was for Adrienne Barbeau, and the deal was for a film called Creepshow, directed by George Romero. And I'm like typing this all up, and it said the terms of the deal are as follows, and I lost my breath. I was like, what are they? What are the terms of the deal? What do they do? How does this work? And, those moments where it's really like what the French call coup de foudre. It's like lightning strikes your head, and you suddenly realize this is your fate. This is connected to your fate. So I was still in Hollywood kindergarten and worked as an assistant, and that's another story in terms of how I became an agent.
So aging in the industry. I want to hear about it from the perspective of someone who's not in front of the camera, because that's a whole other game. But I actually don't think it's that different.
It's not in many ways, because you're not in front of a camera, but you're in front of the town. The town is a really small place, and it's an insider place. So whatever people see with of what Hollywood is, they see what is presented and through the media, and sometimes those things are very filtered, and sometimes they're embarrassing for people, because the filter doesn't protect them from the scrutiny of the public if they do something bad or something wrong. But in the insider world of Hollywood, you show up a lot. And at this particular time in the early 80s, you would go, before we had all the devices that we have and the ways that we gather information, you just went out and you got it by showing up in person at studios and networks. So, and you're doing this from the space of a corporate environment of being an agent, which has a very corporate mentality, and it's a reflection of the corporate mentality of Hollywood as a factory, which is as a business, which is what it is. I was the only woman, so I became the head of my department. I was the only woman who was the head of a department, and I kind of doubled down on my femininity, because I saw other women looking like librarians, so that they thought they could blend in, or people wore pantsuits, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be either one of those things. I already had a complex that inside I was like that I was this nerdy librarian, substitute first grade teacher girl, because I had been educated a certain way in Boston, and I walked and talked with a person like that, and my name was Blaylock after all. So there was a part of myself that was being so suppressed, and at that time I started earning more and more money, and so I went for Hollywood glamour. So I wore, pink Conbria lipstick, bright pink lipstick, shoulder pads. It was the era of the big shoulder and the big hair. I didn't have the hair for the big hair, but it's not that I wore a lot of makeup. I didn't, except for the lipstick, really. But I wore beautiful clothes, all of which I got on sale. So it magnified what appeared the appearance of prosperity, which people expect agents to have. Even though I was a young agent and I was competing with other people who had, were driving around in Bentleys and had huge houses. I didn't, but I was competing with those people. I was competing with men, who had been there for a decade or more, who had already elevated themselves materially. So women know how to look. I don't know.
Like money.
Like money.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's just like money.
Yeah.
And so I looked like money. I was the head of my department. I had this job. I was doing it really well. And I was going toe-to-toe with negotiating deals against lawyers who'd been educated at Harvard and Yale, because those are the kinds of people that come here, are the people at the top of their classes in places that have a lot of status. And I had been taught, I had great mentors, who were, of course, both men, who had taught me how to be an agent, because all agents have master agents. To this day, the business, in spite of all the technological changes, it's still exactly the same. You start as an assistant. Everybody started as an assistant. Even people that you don't think were ever human beings, that they're such gods, they started as an assistant, as a schlepper. And you work on a desk, And if you behave a certain way, which really is what people call if you get it, because most people don't get it. If you get it, then you're valuable. And I was lucky that the agent that trained me was my age and saw me as a fellow traveler that made him better. And he departed the company, and basically I lobbied, which is another story about how I did it, because it's kind of a story, but I lobbied for this position, and they gave it to me sort of out of entertaining themselves. They assumed that this little girl would fail, and it would be just hilarious. They really just didn't really have enough of a hand in my origin story at that point in time, although later they certainly did. Once I had that responsibility, I really did need their help. I needed to learn more. I needed to learn the next level of what that would be like, and I did. But I learned quickly, and I learned really well. So I ascended to that kind of status. And so in terms of Hollywood, I went for glamour. I had a friend who had been born and raised in Beverly Hills and had a very glamorous mother and grew up, like in the neighborhood that everybody wished they lived in. And, she took me to Neiman Marcus and introduced me to people. This is my friend Nancy. She needs the perfect lipstick. She needs, this, that, and the other thing, because also there were all these black tie events that you would go to after working all day, and you'd be in your suit. Then you would put on, a velvet dress and go out and still work where all the power people would show up at these charity events or premieres, and you would go there. So I had a closet full of amazing clothes and shoes, and it's, which was very much donning a costume that got me a lot of approval.
There's a different sexual political situation going on. What I recognize from going to markets, you see all the salespeople and the executives and whoever. There's a whole, it's like the celebrity, the actor, that world is a separate experience from what's actually going on in the political games. And it's almost like we don't talk to them really. Like there's some people that are star fuckers, but it seems like there's another game being played. Meaning when you go to an industry event at MIP, for example, I think about MIP because it's a TV market as opposed to, Cannes, the film festival, which is the same place but very different energy. It's like deals are going down, or even at
Cannes, any festival, deals are going down.
Deals are going down in the market or in the hotels, but then there's the red carpet and there's the show. There's like what you were saying. There's the glossy
They're tied
version.
together. These things are tied together. It is about its status, the appearance of status. And then actually having, but the people who are doing the deal, that's all like kind of the nitty gritty, how the money changes hands.
But did you feel like you had to compete with the female star, the actress, as the terms of fuckability?
No, absolutely. I had to look glamorous, and I did. As I said, this friend of mine who introduced me to everyone at Neiman Marcus, also then that translated to, I had another friend who was in, at Saks, where people, would call and tell, come in because there's something for you. And it's Hollywood. They've been doing this since the dawn of time, where the stores would cater to people whom they knew had to wear a certain kind of wardrobe. Some people were stylists who styled people. I didn't really need that, but I also, I was a size 4 I'm fortunate. I don't even try. That's, and I was tall. I could do, and I also just in my life, I had a fashionable mother and a fashionable grandmother, and I knew how to do that. But I was still inside the nerdy girl who read books. I always felt less than. Certainly actresses seemed ridiculously attractive to me. And they used that power for their careers, which I don't blame them at all. It's a tool to manipulate men. And, you're talking about a town where, I was 5'8", and I would wear, stiletto heels and towered over most of the men that, you'd be sitting down at lunch and then you stand up and, and they'd be like, then they'd head for the exit, unless they kind of liked that idea. And but I didn't know how to use that power. It's funny. I mean, in retrospect, and even at the time, or soon after, looking back at that time, I realized that I didn't take advantage of what I looked like, because I didn't think that I looked as attractive as other women. When in fact it's silly. When I see pictures, it's, of course I definitely would have passed somebody's standard of attractiveness, and even very attractive, and I didn't know that at the time. I only, like every woman, I magnified my flaws.
Did things change when you started to dress the part? Did you find that
It was still a lot of pressure. It took time to get dressed and make sure that it was like putting on a performance.
Yeah.
But it worked. It did. It had a really positive impact.
people wanted to work with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and they wanted to sign with me, and they wanted to be represented by me. In fact, one actress that everybody wanted to sign at that time came in and said, "I'm going to New York next week. Can you come with me and kind of take me shopping? Tell me what to buy." And I remember going into my boss and saying, "I can't go to New York. I don't want to go to New York. I don't want to go shopping with her." He said, "Don't worry, we'll work it out. We'll, that's nice that she's so happy about what you're wearing."
Yeah.
It definitely, but that meant, particularly for black tie events, that meant hair, nails, makeup. It's a lot of jewelry. It's a lot of work. But I did look the part, and I needed it. I needed to feel like I was welcome at the ball, because I was Cinderella. I was somebody who worked incredibly. I wasn't like running around doing this all day. I was working all day, and then I had to just jump into a pumpkin coach at night. And I keenly felt resentment toward other women who were able to go. They went to the spa earlier in the day. They had a stylist come. They had somebody figuring this all out for them. And then I had to go home and read a dozen scripts. So I definitely felt like, poor me.
So then what happened, because this is where I'm at now, is I'm in that stage of, I don't think that this is going to continue to work for me for much longer, this, being the belle of the ball. What was that transition like for you, and where were you at your career when you started to see the facade?
I always saw the facade. I always felt out of place, because people would say to me, first of all, people didn't think I was Jewish. I mean, I'm half Irish, so whatever. I mean, they just sort of saw the last name, and they saw that I had looked very glamorous, and they assumed I had this very charmed life, and that I came from privilege and money. I had gone to an all-girls school, but in Boston, Girls Latin was a public school. The girls' half of Boston Latin was founded in 1635, a year before Harvard, 1636, which is sort of the thing that you say when you talk about this school. Benjamin Franklin went there. John Quincy Adams went there. JFK went. The boys' half. And I went to the girls' half, but it was a public school with a blind admission. It was just based on testing. And if you tested well, you got in, and it was very competitive and very difficult. And I got a classical education that would have cost a fortune in a private version of that. But everybody assumed, because I had that education, that appearance, and they just assumed that I was a very privileged person. So I was very unique, very aware of the facade, how important the facade was, and that I had a facade that was working. But it wasn't me. I liked nice things, and I earned them. I didn't value them in this. I valued those things. I thought they were pretty, but I didn't value them in terms of the thing of being that, whatever the male gaze is, and whatever the Hollywood gaze is, which is through a business lens of where you are in the pecking order, is not being attractive. Is maybe going to give you a point, but the work that you do, the reputation that you have, how important your clients are, how you handle yourself in the work that you do as an agent, that's what really determined my status. And I did my job really, really well. As a result, that sort of lent more approval. But definitely the ballast for the approval, I see it more clearly now that I'm not looking at all my flaws, was my appearance, for sure.
What age were you when you stopped working as an agent and decided to begin work as an educator?
Well, that's sort of a two-parter. I was turning 40. I had worked for 12 years as an agent, and I was, I guess I was pretty much at the top level, and I planned on staying there. And then I met my daughter's father, who was also a person with a lot of status in terms of what he did, and I looked the part. I mean, for him, I looked a certain way. Based on my job, my wardrobe choices, my appearance, my manner of speaking and communicating, which was another one of those situations, as I had mentioned, after my first marriage, I divorced, got my name back. And so now I had my name, my actual name, and that part of my identity. But like a lot of powerful women, and particularly at that time, it was lonely. And I had already been married to a man who I was the breadwinner, and I really didn't want to go through that again. So I met someone that I thought was a person who actually had higher, more powerful relationships with celebrities, because mine wasn't about celebrities per se. I did business with the representatives of those celebrities, and in some cases intersected those people. But he was hanging out with those people. That was part of his job. So he seemed like a powerful figure to me in some way. And but the things that I admired about him really had nothing to do with that. And I met him, and then 2 minutes later I was pregnant, and realized that that was all based on illusion on my part as well as his. I was 40 at that point. So long story short, his business was based in New York. So, and also I found that very few women had been able to balance or even have or maintain the careers they were having, and also started having children. And it was a very complex time in terms of how that was happening, because that had never happened in Hollywood before. This was the 80s, and there were a lot of women who had been presidents of studios, or they were extremely valued and essential. And there were lawyers, producers of production company, people or staff at production companies, and at networks and studios and independent places. So suddenly, women were either having children or not. And I was not, because I didn't really have a partner. Then I met this man who became my partner, and suddenly what was more important to me than anything was my daughter, we moved to New York for his business. And typically, I'll just interject this, typically women in any business, we're all like Marlene Dietrich at the end of Morocco, where she's standing in the sand with the high heels. She takes them off and follows the Foreign Legion. Women will follow men anywhere. It's certainly not the other way around. When a woman gets a job, she doesn't come home and say, guess what, we're moving to Cleveland. I got the job, I got it, but we're moving to Cleveland. He doesn't go there. Women always go where men's work takes them.
Which is why I loved Friday Night Lights. Did you watch that whole series and how it ended?
I did not. I saw episodes. If I had a client who directed episodes, I saw them, but I did not follow I didn't have the kind of life where I could be a person and follow shows. I just looked at videos that clients did.
Well, spoiler alert, but he ends up moving for her job because she's been following him around their whole life and setting up her life wherever he's working. And he ends up leaving and following her. She gets a job at a university running their HR or something or recruitment. It's really beautiful, the ending.
Well, see, now it singularly stands out to you, doesn't it? In the, Flower in the Desert, that a man did that. And perhaps we're living in times where this can change as women. And I also wondered about this, like going all the way back to when the military where women started being able to enlist in the military in the 70s. They had to do everything that men had to do. There were virtually no adaptations. I thought, how's that going to work? So life was very much a reflection of that, and certainly in Hollywood. And I had been a childless. I would go to the bridal showers, and I finally, wouldn't go to them anymore. baby showers. I wouldn't go to them anymore. I'd just have a gift delivered because it felt like this catastrophic loss to me that I would never be able to have that. I would only have this success, which I felt like a very privileged prisoner of at that time. When I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed, but I was with the wrong person. So that was, that had its own really challenging aspects to it. So I left. I folded my tent at the height of what I was doing. And I say it really with the assertion that I was happy to fold my tent in the sense that my daughter needed me more than my clients, more than my employers, more than the infrastructure of power that I had been connected to. I did it perfectly freely, but at the same time, I look back on it, I think I probably had a lot more choices if I'd been a different person than I was. I was in many ways a very insecure person, that all the privilege and the appearance didn't help with that. So I left, and I left for 5 years, assuming that was the rear view of what I had done. I had this life in Hollywood. I was an agent, and I had this career. But that would then going forward, it would be in the past. By happenstance, God laughs when you make plans. I was invited to return back to California. My marriage was breaking up. The person that had trained me at the first agency I worked at had called, and we just started talking, and the person who was running his lit department had left to go to another company, and he said, yeah, I guess I'll figure it out, unless, of course, you'd be interested in coming back. And I pulled my whole life together. I was living in New Hampshire in a teeny tiny town surrounded by 1 million acres of the White Mountain National Forest. It was very idyllic, but I had not a penny to my name, which was another story of that marriage. And got in the Jeep Cherokee like it was a covered wagon, shot down Route 40, ended up at the Riviera Country Club where my friend, who was about to become my boss, handed me the keys to his Porsche, his father's briefcase, that his father had been a lawyer at MCA, so it was the MCA briefcase, and he said, okay, let's roll, make some dough. And I had to build a practice all over again from scratch, but I actually built a practice that superseded the first one I had that was pretty amazing. So I did that with a 5-year-old as a single parent. And that was really extremely difficult. So before in Hollywood, it was like getting a partner was the thing. Maybe trying to raise a family somehow with very, very little, with no support or very little support, or you had to transition to a different part of the business to be a mother, to be a parent, or give it up. Entirely, I was now a single mother. The other people that I knew, which were very few people who had children, they had power partners, they had nannies, they had assistants, they had and I was coming back with nothing. So it was extremely difficult, and there was no sympathy and no understanding or accommodation in any way. It was very, very hard. As I said, I created a practice that superseded even what I had done before, and then I was there for 11 years. Then my daughter was a teenager and had a lot of challenges in her life, in her own trajectory of life. And once again, I left. So I left when she was a baby and chose her, and I chose her again. And so I retired for the second time, because when people would call the first place, where is she? What happened? She retired. And they would literally say she retired to become a mom.
Wow.
And in this instance, I just retired. Then I went back to school and to graduate school in the digital era and got 2 master's degrees. And I thought that would be my road. I would teach children who were and teenagers who were at risk, and they were illiterate in English and Spanish. And I thought, okay, I have a gift, I think. I'm very well educated. I'm very motivated. And I want to be able to also specialize in this arena of teaching writing, teaching children how to express themselves. Because I think if you can express yourself, if the world were a place where everybody could express themselves in one fashion or another, in this instance I was thinking about that being writing, where you see your own voice back at you, that it would certainly reduce violence, because I see violence as is the inability to express yourself or be heard, to the point where you got to fire a gun to get the attention and and the level of participation that you're craving.
We were talking that earlier with regard to misogyny in men and their inability to express the feminine in themselves creates this like doubling down on misogyny, because they're so, appalled by what their connection to their own mothers and their internalized misogyny because of it. Women too.
Well, those were grandiose ideas that I had. I was going to, reduce violence in our community in some fashion, or at least that seemed to me that was a thing that I could do. I wanted to offer that, but I had no idea of the perils ahead of me. In the educational system in Southern California is awfully different than Boston, and I didn't realize that I was the wrong gender, I was the wrong race, I was culturally the wrong person, the wrong kind of person, I was the wrong age. I mean, you name it. It was a checklist of things that I didn't fill what people wanted. Not at all.
That's so interesting that the power dynamic is just as important in that
Yes.
environment as it is in Hollywood.
No, absolutely true. And also, I was older. I was in my 50s. That was also, not in my, people who were in their 50s were people who had been teachers for 25 years. That was okay. They could be in their 50s. And people didn't literally look like me. They just didn't. People were middle-aged, and they looked middle-aged, and I, to them, still looked pretty youthful. Everything about it, I just got such a sense of whatever the opposite of being welcoming is. So I aimed myself for teaching at university, and found a very different atmosphere with 2 master's degrees and the background that I had to teach at UCLA Extension's Writers Program. Then my background seemed extremely desirable to them, although there was a prejudice against people who were agents. So, their attitude was I couldn't teach screenwriting, even though I had a master's degree in screenwriting, and it represented writers and helped them grow their careers. Because I wasn't a writer, I was a bit coming from this other space. So that was another thing of being discounted, because people hate agents. I mean, that's truly, agents are, first, you're the holy grail. Everybody knows they need an agent. Everybody wants an agent, and we've talked about this before. And then once they get the agent, it's like you're instantly devalued. Instantly, you're dishonest. You're probably doing something nefarious, or you're a thief, and you're a clown.
And you're not working hard enough, and everything's your fault.
Everything's your fault, and
Yeah.
they didn't really need you, and you really didn't do anything. So, and so that. But then I ran into Linda Venus, who was the head of that program, and I said, "Well, you know what? I don't really want to teach writing. I'm going to teach people who are aspiring writers how to have a writing career." And that's an entirely different thing. What do you do when you're not writing? And she was stopped in her tracks. She dropped her pen. What do you do when you're not writing to have a writing career? And then people would say, oh, networking and branding. That's it. You have to do those 2 things. And I said, I never talk about those things. That's not what you should be doing. And so then she became curious. What is it? And I said, well, look at my syllabus. I'll create one for you. And I did. So I started teaching those classes. How to get an agent and launch your screenwriting career. Very long title that they came up with for my class. People in those classes were absolutely stunned. That they would say, no one's ever told me any of this before. And basically I just gave them a lot of the mechanics of how the business works, and also what I call the agent's rubric. What's that rubric? Not who are you, really. What are you doing that the agent can see as really reflecting and understanding that it's a career, that the activity you're doing is not solitary, and it's not an escape from the world. It's about joining a business. And how does that work? So, but I have experienced absolutely during the course of my life as an agent, just even saying my profession, you are extremely overvalued. Oh my God, I know you. I have a great idea for a movie. Can I tell you? And and this must mean something to them. It's like when people see celebrities, It's not a neutral atmosphere. They immediately think this is significant in their lives forever, that they encountered you at close range. Similar for agents. But then there's this double-edged tension. They don't really respect you or value you. It's only what you can do for them. And then when you start to even retreat a little bit from this incredibly strange, unhealthy dynamic that is now filling up the air in the room, then you're a horrible, evil, terrible person.
Oh, God, it feels like I was trying to explain to a male friend of mine last night. I went out to a bar. A friend of mine was DJing. And, going out is a new experience with my hair like this. That's a whole other issue.
Your hair like this looks great.
Thank you.
It really does. It's amazing. And I think it's very, I instantly I'll go brave. It's brave. But it's cool, too, that you're just owning, this is what, the grand design of what we are, what we're made of, and that we're constantly trying to stifle it. And manipulate it is ridiculous.
And apologize. I mean, I'm even still in my language apologizing. So this guy was hitting on me, and I was feeling. What were you just saying before that? I forgot what my point was. What were you talking about?
That's what comes with the gray hair.
Oh yeah.
Because what I believe about the gray hair and all these other things, which is if do you know about Wabi-Sabi?
No.
Is it Wabi-Sabi? Am I getting it right? Oh my God. I'm pretty sure in Japan it's the appreciation of the artfulness of aging, including decay. That so when flowers die and we throw them away immediately, we have to throw them away. We can't see that, but there's an appreciation of the different quality that the beautiful takes and is still beautiful. That I think it is called Wabi-Sabi, if I'm getting it right, unless it's from a sushi menu, but I don't think so. And so when something is cracked or chipped, it's still beautiful. When you look at distressed, furniture or floors, it's sort of it's a bastardization of that idea that the object has experienced life or
is that
time.
Where they fill it with gold when there's a crack in it?
No, that's something that's called something else.
Yeah.
And the Japanese don't really do that. We do it now. Now we call it vintage.
Yes.
When something is vintage and it's clearly vintage, it's not that it looks new. The design is from another time.
Yeah.
But it's weathered in some way.
I've been thinking about the story surrounding my hair and okay, so if this story that I've been telling myself that I have to look a certain way in order to be successful in my life or to prove to the world that I am this image that I've created of myself, if that's not true, then what else isn't true? A, and two,
oh my God,
what if
Pandora's box of what isn't true?
I can look at this as being cool and interesting. Then what if I was taking selfies and trying to accentuate the laugh lines and the lines in my face, and what if that happened for young women instead of them trying to blur out their skin so they basically are eyes and mouth and nothing else?
And breasts and body. Women are their bodies.
Yes. But what if we showed those other parts of ourselves? That
some people do. You know how there are people who, women who run art galleries seem to be able to age and look amazing.
Yeah.
Every body type for a certain kind of woman who owns her age. I'm always so impressed by that, and I admire it so much. Because they probably have other concerns, that spoil their day.
Well, some people say, going gray. I've had banker friends. I remember in my 20s, one guy I was dating was saying, I can't wait to get gray hair because it will help me be taken more seriously in my career.
That's funny. No, it's the opposite in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This is a real thing. There are people in their 20s are now getting their hair dyed gray, particularly gay men from what I can tell of a person who dyes as a hairdresser, and there's this big request. And some hair doesn't take gray very well, and it can take several applications, and it's complicated and expensive.
Yeah.
So look at that.
I have a theory about that it has something to do with a need for mentorship and a need for actually some sort of comfort or a change in that story that eventually I'm going to get old and die, and I need to know that it's okay.
Oh, that's interesting. I would never have thought about that, getting comfortable with your own mortality and your own aging process. I just thought it was like a hip, cool thing that it, you know.
No,
and
I
it's,
think it has something to do with mortality, especially that generation that went through 9/11 in their formative years and like has had this sort of big, in the Western world anyway, this big sort of facing death, you know, because my generation didn't really have that in our formative years because we didn't have any wars or what have you. But
Right, but even when you've been through whatever generation you've been through, I think that it's the denial in our American culture, Canadian, North American culture, about death is so extreme, and aging. I think that's the only reason too why aging is something that is avoided and looked at very negatively, because you're getting closer to your own demise.
Well, watching this come in the way it's coming in, like I'm not slowly going gray. I'm going from like passing for 30 something to
Right.
like, what the fuck is on your head? I mean, there are no women actresses, let's say, that when I Google that have gray hair that are over 60 or 70.
In an agency where, I mean, I was I was a talent agent the last year that I worked as an agent, because I had done such a liaison from the lit department with the talent department, because a lot of actors transitioned into being directors or producers, a lot,
Yeah.
for good reason, which is a whole other conversation. But so we had this thing called the cheat sheet. Agents have a thing called cheat sheet, everybody, where you categorize your clients because it's easier to present them and sell them. It's not a bad thing either, by the way. Categories are not bad people at all, and all artists choose them. If you think about any artist that you admire, they chose a category for how they express their gift. So, but actors are divided by age. Like writers are not divided by age; they're divided by genre on a list, on a cheat sheet. So where you're aware of whatever their mastery is, their best quality for a writer. But for an actor, it really is divided by age, because like life, we're divided by age into an age category. That's one of the first things people notice about you is your gender and your age. Before they know your name, they can categorize you. That's life. That's this planet life here. So actors would be under 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 50. You go off a cliff when you're 50. There might have been 50 to 70, and if you were over 70, you didn't have a category. You were just over 70. But no, I think it was really over 50. But it's not who you actually are in human years, it's what you play.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people played under 20 who were well over 20.
Right.
So it's what you play. And some people will age up or they'll age down. Or age, meant the inflection the other way. People will age up. I can play older. I can do it. And also, I'm startled when I do see actors now, when I'm like, wait a minute, on that other show, this person looked much older.
Yeah.
So that's a component to being an actor, is your age. But it's for the character. Is it believable that the character, or does it work more for the story of the character, for the character to be this age?
Yeah.
You are categorized. I won't say types, because it's not really necessarily about that. Some people are pretty, some people are heavier, they're more charactery or funny, or not necessarily funny. Just it creates a different atmosphere of where that person might be in life. What kind of life they might be living might be a little bit different. So being necessarily like the front and center attractive lead is not necessarily a good career choice, but people don't see that. Everybody wants that, the cheerleader.
I remember when I was at Strasbourg, we had this class where we sat with one of the teachers and presented our headshot and our resume, and then she would categorize us. And I remember her saying that to me, you're a lead. You look like a young Julianne Moore or whatever. And I was like, my body like was repulsed by what she said. And she's like, does that surprise you? And I said, yeah, I mean, people tell me I look like these people all the time, but sort of like what you were saying earlier, I feel like a dog that thinks it's a puppy, like I look in the mirror and I don't see what I feel like I am, like this. And so what I feel like has happened to me over the course of this career, particularly as an actor, because it didn't, even in cheerleading, wasn't as offensive, as aggressive, is that I became an image. that I was putting out into the world via my reel, my headshots, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media stuff. And then it became increasingly more and more competitive, let's say. And then I would look at these images and then see myself in the mirror and feel this extreme disconnect between what I was putting out and who I really was. And so as my hair started to grow in, I would feel this grief because I would see the gray and feel like there's a woman in there and there's a life that's progressing that I am not bearing witness to.
Right. You're not bearing witness to the progression of aging.
Yes.
We avoid it. And we look for every way we can to camouflage it through, the way you sort of dress your face and your hair and and the choices of the things you wear. I mean, I finally have got to a place where, no, I'm too old to wear that. I've seen other women sometimes do, and it looks great or it looks awful. But I have a different standard for myself now. I'm in my 60s. I still, I still don't want, I still fight the age that you can see on my face. But I think that some people do the intervention of plastic surgery and it looks great on them because it's their bone structure is friendlier to responding to that kind of intervention in their aging process, if I'll put it awkwardly that way. But most people don't look the same and they don't look better. They look strange or distorted. I'm afraid I don't know whatever I naturally have and how that intersects surgery to I could look like a monster or look just ridiculous. And so the fear is greater. The fear is greater. Is so great. And then I've seen people do all kinds of other things, but I also am afraid of those things.
What's your relationship like with your hair? Do you color it or what's your...
I do. I wasn't blessed with your color gray, but I have gray. Like now I have gray. So it's there, but it doesn't kind of dominate because it's just that gray that's neither here nor there. It's the gray mouse now instead of the dirty blonde mouse.
See, now this is one of the stories that I've been exploring too, is when I first went gray. A lot of people would be like, well, you can do it. But my husband has this hair. Really?
He has silvery gray, and his brother has the same hair, and their mother had the same hair. It's beautiful hair. He looks handsome and fabulous in his gray hair. But if I can tell, I've started to do it a little bit and talk to the hair. It's not the fabulous.
How
gray.
often do you have to go in and get, or do you go in to get highlights?
Probably every 8 weeks or something like that. And I don't ever do it. I would never dye my hair like all one color because I think that an older person looks like a helmet, and you're not fooling anybody. I never wanted to do. My mother was a redhead, and she did that for many, many, many years. My grandmother, who had jet black hair when she was younger, was like every grandmother in the 60s, had blonde hair and cat eye glasses. And she stopped dyeing her hair when she was 90. She lived to be 97. She was fine, and she finally went gray. She said, "I'm finally doing it. It's too exhausting." At 90.
Oh my God.
So
I had this thing I'm 43, and I had this thing where I was like, okay, well, yeah, I really can't stand to do this anymore because it's every 3 weeks, but I'm just going to do it until I'm in my 50s, and then I will at least have established my acting career a little bit, whatever. And then I looked at myself, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? 10 more years?
Right.
Of every 3 weeks?
No.
And I'm sorry, I was going bald. I was losing my hair. A layer of my scalp was coming off. I'm allergic to ammonia. Like, it was getting really sensitive, really bad. And I found stuff that didn't have ammonia in it and started to use that, but there was heat coming off of my head for 2 days after.
Look at that.
It's toxic.
We could have such a big conversation about hair. For me, it was letting it go curly and having natural curl instead of straightening it, which is another thing that in our culture is it should be straight with little coils maybe that are, the Barbie coil. And that's it, not curly. Some people get away with it, and at first it was very hard for me to do that. And it was frizzy, and the way my gray hair is, it just looked very messy. So then I decided, it really took about 6 months for me to really totally and completely accept it, and get to a space where I knew what products that were not so troublesome or expensive that I could just do. And, basically I spurt water on it. That's all I do now. And then it's this. And I've accepted it, because also from straightening it, because at one point in my education phase of my career, I was the director of a writing school at a university in San Francisco, and I commuted from Los Angeles to San Francisco every single week. 4 days a week I was in Los Angeles, 3 days a week I was in San Francisco, and so I would get my hair blown dry. And my hair started falling out.
Yeah.
It was getting thinner and falling. But that was the appearance. I was the director. All eyes were on me. I had to be put in the public part of my job and show up. And that to me was looking well groomed, which is an absurd myth that we have in our society. I mean, look what our women of color go through, which is why people get older and wear a collection of wigs, because the damage that's done from straightening your hair, from the chemicals, from the heat, all of it. That's a hair alone for women. Huge topic. And women who have, very thick, long, flowing hair tend to keep it, because it's a source of power.
Yeah, that absolutely I felt like was for me. And almost, especially in LA, I've noticed in comparison to other cities that I've lived in, people comment on my appearance and what I'm wearing almost every time I leave the house. It's just like a way to connect with people, which is so interesting, because wow, there are other ways, So I definitely, when I moved here, it became more of a thing, to the point where it started to, I felt, cripple me. I had to plan my life around my hair.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I was dyeing it, when I was blowing it out, when it, what days it looks good, second, third day, whatever.
You can't go swimming. You can't. Oh my God, it's raining. Well, look at Trump and his hair.
Yeah.
Look at it's interesting that a man would have to even think that way. But I'm sure that some men do.
Yeah.
But almost all women do. You know where you are and where you're going to be, and some people have probably hair that's easier to maintain, a certain kind of hair that also has the appearance that's most acceptable in our culture. So they worry about other things, I'm sure.
So
Their weight or something else.
I wanna ask if you see a difference between when you were an agent the first time, when you were an agent the second time, and when you were an agent now, in terms of how because I was different ages. That's true. Yeah.
Before I was everybody. I think it was Carrie Fisher who said, everybody's hot in their 20s. So even though I didn't think I was hot, I know other people think that I was, which I would be like, they're crazy. I'm not.
Right.
I'm full of all these flaws, and just don't think like that about me. So, the first time, as I said, clothing became an important component to make up for other insecurities that I had in Hollywood. A lot of people in Hollywood still were second and third or more generation. They were given opportunities because they were raised in it. And as people who were on the outside of Hollywood, raised as outsiders, do not understand the insider part of Hollywood at all. They really don't know how to behave, and they think they do, or they think that they've earned their entrance if they think that they have talent. But no, there's a code of behavior. I'll call it a code. It's kind of a dumb word for it, but it's not a code, and it's not a standard. It's very natural to behave a certain way. Makes people comfortable, because then they know that you understand how things are. Meaning, and it's not a negative thing. It actually isn't a negative thing, and it isn't what everyone thinks it is. It's just about, I'll give you an example. When you see people shooting, their security. Why is there security? Because people do not behave properly. They suddenly, rational adults, become mean children. I want to see that. I can talk to that person. I know that person. They don't know you. They know you from television or some other way. They want to, and then they think they can just, you're a public service to answer their questions. Or people would show up in agencies in the lobby and they'd want to see an actor. and they wouldn't leave till people, you had to call the police to take them away. They have this sort of really immature idea that, that they're connected to Hollywood, even though Hollywood wants everybody to feel connected and buy tickets and consume their product, streaming services, all of it. But there's an unhealthy connection that people think they have that isn't really real. They've experienced it. It feels so real to them that they act out. So people will not be honest. People will make things up or treat other people badly or strangely or not understand how they're supposed to behave. It's true in the corporate world too. It's true in an operating theater in a hospital. If you were like, oh, I just want to put on the gown and watch them do the surgery, and then you start saying, hey doc, why are you making that? People don't know how to behave in other people's workplaces. I'll just shorthand it that way.
Yeah.
So in Hollywood, the people who are raised in it, they do know because they've seen their parents and their grandparents. So they do understand what is appropriate in the Hollywood workplace where people are working and trying to get their work done. They're not playing in a circus at all. So there's that. I had the insecurity of being an outsider. Film school was something most people didn't do. And getting a master's degree wasn't something that people did either in filmmaking or screenwriting. And it wasn't really valued. You didn't really need it. So I felt people, if you appear a certain way, people are more welcoming. And also I looked like money. So I did that the first time. And I was putting on a brave face all the time because I was very unhappy in my marriage and then very lonely in my divorce. And in self-indulgence, too. I upped the ante quite a bit. The stuff I'd buy on sale be, still, like, ridiculously expensive. And these things were all here. All the goodies are here in Los Angeles for the Hollywood people. Then the second time, I was a single mother. I just went for J. Crew. I didn't have the same kind of money, although I ended up making real money again. But it took a couple of years of working incredibly hard. And I just went for things that were more, I guess, I'm trying to think of...
Classic?
They were classic and cheaper.
Yeah.
Definitely much cheaper. I had a child. I had other expenses, private school. Other things were more important to me. The cars that I had in the first instance, too, I had a vintage 280 SL. I had a Jaguar convertible. I had a Jaguar sedan. And then when I came back, I had a VW station wagon, Passat, which was a nice car, but not, everybody else was doing something else. And then the Prius I got because I was trying to be socially conscious, but it became okay, because money could drive a Prius.
Right.
But I didn't have the same appearance of money, and I actually got criticized for it. The wife of one of my writers was extremely uncomfortable with my choices. She actually gave me, for my birthday, like $1,000 purse. And she said, you have to wear this. I mean, people are not going to take you seriously unless you do this. And she said, the shoes, the bag, this is really important. And I was like, I can't believe I'm being lectured by the person I was being lectured by. And also I was like, well, yeah, I used to not even think about that stuff. I was I was in Beverly Hills on the court. My office was 2 blocks from Rodeo Drive.
Right.
And I shopped it during the sales, but I shopped it. I bought all that stuff, and it was very expensive without even thinking about it. And then when I was living in New Hampshire, I sold all of it. That was my situation. New Hampshire was extremely different, and unfortunately, but people were like, where did these magical, amazing objects that they've only seen in magazines come from?
Right.
And that was that era, and I was never going to do that again. It's not where I was going to put my money.
Yeah.
And I came back with nothing really, and then I had to build it all back up again. But I didn't want it.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that again at all.
Did you find a difference?
I had to pay for college for my daughter. I had to save money.
In the interactions with people, because I recently have learned about what I lead with. Even walking into a room now, I walk into a room with this energy of my appearance and the way I look, and then realize I don't look the same as I did the last time I walked in this room.
Right.
And then have to adjust and sort of reevaluate. So, like, going into deals and, where you used to lead to cover your insecurities, what did you then lead with? Was it a conscious decision, or was it just like get my head down and work?
Oh no, I had to work. When you're an agent, if you don't create a revenue stream, you don't have a job. But you have to. You have a bottom line. You must book a certain number of deals, or you're not pulling your weight. It's really a simple formula, and that's true in the corporate world. So you have to eat what you kill. So you have to kill, which is the crudest way of looking at it. But I mean, I only saw it as I'm doing really good work. I'm delivering people they're helping deliver their entertainment. People need their entertainment, and people dream of being able to earn their living as artists. If that's what if that's what killing is, okay. But the second time was definitely different because my power came more from maturity in that sense, because I'd already had a really successful career the first time. So, and I came back, nobody handed me anything. Nobody did. I did get the Porsche and the keys to the Porsche, which I had for a whole week, and the MCA briefcase, and I was living at the country club on the second floor for a month. But then I had to create a place to live, my place for my daughter to go to school, a car to drive, a wardrobe of like office/corporate outfits that would just be welcome anywhere. And also we were in the era of not the pantsuit, but of the ensemble of the blazer and the pants. And you could pretty much get away with just looking really nice, prosperous, but not money.
Right.
It really wasn't about money for me. And I had jewelry. I had like lots of really.
You had a
I had
resume,
money. I had money.
too.
So I'd already done that. And when I was criticized for this by women, not just this one person that I mentioned, by other women, that I didn't whatever they said, but I couldn't remember the exact terms. But it was basically you don't look like money. I would say, how do you know I don't have it? How do you know I don't own half the state of New Hampshire? Maybe I keep it in a safety deposit box.
Because real money doesn't necessarily do that.
No, I know that. You know that. Not everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But that was the position. But I had to say that. I had to say it just like that, so that people. I'd say I just don't. I'm from a different part of the world. I'm from the East Coast. I would just say I don't wear it. It's somewhere else. My prosperity is wherever I decide it should be. I had to actually say this to apologize. I didn't go to wasn't going to black tie events every 5 minutes like I was the first time. I was a single parent, so if people from the office went, the men would go. Because they could. And then the third time, which is very different, I am the oldest person there by far. How do I say this? I find some things they're not really, everything is on sale. I just, by principle, I just don't like paying retail for anything because it's so much money. You might as well wait and go get nice things on sale. But we're in downtown. There are all kinds of sources for inexpensive clothing that if you know what you're doing and you pull it together, you can look like $1 million. And also there are costume jewelry now really is creative and creates a little bit of a level of sparkle. But no one, I'm working in Venice in a house that's been rehabbed into an office. So it's not like when I was working on the Sun America building in the 28th floor and having a view of the coast of California where you're in, it's like being inside an architectural device that contains a city full of people. So but these are things that they're nice. And they're nicer than the people I work with oh God, and if they were listening to this, I'd die of embarrassment. Because they're at the beginning of their careers, so we don't earn the same amount of money. Everybody looks fine. Through dressing myself with a little bit more of ceremony, a little bit of pomp, if there's a better word, I'm sure.
Polish.
Polish. Thank you. There's polish. I have a patina of polish. These things are, some of them they're a little more expensive, and some of them are just incredible bargains that I'm able to find because I'm good at that.
Well, you buy. I've learned to buy pieces that are going to last me a long time.
Yes.
That are classic, and so I have 20 years of wardrobe where a woman in her 20s doesn't.
Exactly right.
know?
That's exactly right. And you have the lesson of time, and what's good fabric, and and you've had the experience of like, no, don't go there.
Yeah. Well, I
know.
go to Goodwill and look for the good fabrics.
Oh, I know, 100%.
Yeah.
And you can pull those things together and look very polished and very individual.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably pretty what my style. I'm not. The first one was polished, but going up to a flamboyant level in terms of. Excuse me. I was definitely emulating a higher level of expense of what I could afford.
Do you think then that the financial aspect of your appearance trumps, sorry to use that word, the age?
I do think when women are older, more jewelry, expensive clothes. I definitely see that if I shop at Neiman Marcus now on sale. No, they don't come to meet me at the curb anymore. In terms of what I was capable of doing there. But I still have my card. I still go there, during the Christmas week when everything is on sale. And I do see, well, I should go there on a regular day, but you do see people who are older who invest in clothing to make themselves, and they do look great. They look great, and who doesn't look great in great clothes? Everybody does.
Well, there's, loving clothing and adorning this communication tool that we have, and then there's the identity aspect, right? Which is what I'm really interested in kind of dismantling is like, okay, so who do I have to be now in my 60s to thrive in this community?
And in my 60s in the Hollywood community, I do look like a person who's polished. I still, I consider, I hate saying it this way, but I'm still the same size that I was. So I'm capable of looking healthy, whatever, or it looks, that is considered to be youthful, I guess, which is whether you're aiming to do it or not, it's considered to be an advantage. So, but I definitely, I think like my assistant would look silly in my clothes. It's because it's different. It communicates a person. I know my own style. It's definitely more authentic. I think, which is the answer you were looking for. Definitely more authentically me.
Yeah.
It's not taking a portion of my income, and it's things that I know. It's not costumey. It's what I like.
Right. Okay. We could talk forever,
Yes.
obviously.
Yes.
The final question I want to ask you is about, as you're moving into the, next chapter of your life, the next 30, 40 years of your life, how do you foresee the, what did you call it? The
Wabi-Sabi.
Wabi-Sabi. What is Wabi-Sabi for you and facing that in your own face and your hair?
Yeah. Well, curly, which, my husband had said to me, I like it curly. And I was just sort of like, I hated curly because we're all brought up to value straight hair.
Oh, I love curly
Yeah,
hair.
see, and you have straight hair and beautiful hair. So the hair thing, I just decided I'm going to try to go as natural as I possibly can. Right now, this helps to actually, believe it or not, condition and make it sort of thicker by having whatever the process that's being used, which is sparing, but it's there. And also, I adore my hairdresser lives in Detroit, and he comes here for his clients. He still flies here, and I love seeing. It's a way to see him. So that's kind of a little of an unusual response about hair. In terms of the Wabi-Sabi, I'm trying really hard to appreciate the lines in my face and the aspects of overt aging that define the decade that I'm in. My neck, it's like Nora Ephron's book. I feel so bad about my neck because when you get older, that's definitely a huge issue, is this. How I deal with it, I see people on TV who are the pundits, or a lot of people who are elder statespeople or experts in their fields, and I see I look at immediately at their chins and their necks. And they are the age they are. Some people, and it's a question of genetics too. With what kind of skin you have, what kind of bone structure you have, you don't really know what you're going to get. I do think about that. I think about it actually probably. No, I don't think I'm so preoccupied. I'm kind of busy with other things. But
it creeps in.
It does. It always does. And plus, you feel differently. You don't have the same energy, and you have identified medical issues and all kinds of things that you have to cope with. And you become very aware of your age and the difference in your experience in aging. Not just looking in a mirror, but how you feel not looking in a mirror, and you're just moving through time and realizing the body is, no matter how you feel in your mind, there's maturity, there's still immaturity that you can observe in yourself, but your body is not immature. Your body is a mature body, and it's your version of maturity, because not everybody, I think people do fall into categories too as they age, and age manifests differently in different body types. And so you start to become like, oh, my body type is this one. And so this is where it's going to manifest more. And I do have to resist the urge to try to control it and accept it. I think everybody, because we were brought up in this culture, we live in this culture, and there are many things that are changing in this culture. I mean, we know what inappropriate behavior, we always know what inappropriate and illegal behavior is, but now people are actually saying, no, we have to enforce the law and we have to stop behaving a certain way, with to shorthand it, Me Too and Time's Up, in terms of there being equity in the representation of women in power and wealth that's been totally and completely monopolized by men. And women have been cast aside. It's, in that sense, and men almost always go for women who are quite a bit younger, and particularly in Hollywood and in Southern California. That's pretty cliched. People do it, though. They really do it. So I think about it. I don't think about that I'm going to be cast aside. I don't think about that I'm going to be passed over, because I'm not. Or do you know? I mean, in terms of my professional persona. But if I were to venture outside of Hollywood, I don't know. It might be very different in terms of what kind of value I might have.
It's not as inflamed. It seems. I know that it exists everywhere else, obviously, but it's just so inflamed here.
And it is. It is. But if you have built a reputation, and I say this also too, because I teach a class to women writers, and I talk to them a lot about building their reputation, and that's a really foreign concept to women. It really, really is, to really fully appreciate and understand what that means.
Well, because you have to always be on guard and ready to shift your life based on what your last name is.
Yes, but you have to care about your reputation. You have to really see it as an entity that you have.
Well, I mean, we're trained to always be on, like an actor is always trained to stay put and to be ready to move at a moment's notice and take a job and give up whatever you're doing. It's like with women, we're trained that, yes, do your thing, but remember he's going to come along at some point, or he's going to need this at some point.
Or
the kids. Yeah. So I understand why it's foreign. That makes complete sense.
Well, and I wanted to just land on your point a little more clearly, which was about, how do you handle aging? I would like to handle it better. In some ways, I feel like I am handling it better than I have in the past. I mean, I freaked out when I turned 30.
So did I.
I freaked out when I turned 40. But here's what I did when I was 40. I sold a client script for $1 million to a studio. So that client was grateful to me and wanted to give me a gift. So he gave me a first-class round-trip ticket to Hong Kong from Los Angeles. I wasn't married. I was single, and so it was one ticket, and it was an open-ended ticket. So then I decided, a friend of mine had just gone to Bali, and then I decided I really wanted to go there. So I thought, I'll go to Hong Kong. I'll reroute the ticket to Bali. I stayed in one of the best hotels in Hong Kong, which really is saying something, and one of the best hotels in Bali, which is also really saying something. And I took this trip, and I started in Hong Kong, And on my actual 40th birthday, I got on the Star Ferry, in which is it's 15-minute ride, but it's the harbor, it's the South China Sea, and I went to the head of the ferry, and I had bright red lipstick. It was really had to be with a bright red lipstick that a girlfriend had given me, and just was in the middle of the harbor saying, "Okay, I'm 40, I'm alone. I have no idea how the rest of my life is going to be, getting older and older, but look what I've got."
Yeah.
And it had been given to me as a gift for a real what's the word for the zenith of deal making at that moment, from somebody who was grateful to me for having those skills to help to make that happen. So it's not so bad. It's not so terrible to be 40. And so I try to remember that, and also right now I'm married to someone that I adore, and it's so different than being married to someone who really makes you miserable. So and there are things that I have achieved, so I can say no. This is the next part of the journey.
I am not my
is
skin.
No, I'm not my skin.
Yeah.
Or that my skin is okay. That it's okay that I am my age, or that I look my age. Most people tell me I don't, everybody, oh, you don't look your age. And of course, I'm sort of pleased by that, because whatever people imagine my age to look like, something Gloria Steinem said something so great when she turned 40. People were saying, "You don't look like you're 40. You look so good." And she said, without missing a beat, "This is what 40 looks like." I'd like to be more like that about it. But I'm less insecure, possibly because of the circumstances of my life, of being given the job to do again, and coming home to somebody who is fantastic. I think if I weren't, those two things are so huge, and other things in my life that are good, I think I would have
the energy goes there. It's like a place for it to land.
Yes, but I think it would be more difficult if I was in a place of being disappointed, or feeling victimized, or if I had a really terrible health. A lot of things would make it harder.
There's the illusion of control. That if I can control my hair, and I started saying this at 30.
Absolutely.
I know I'm aging, but I can control my hair, so all my focus goes there, and that's the thing I can whip around, so you don't
and your
actually
skin
notice
and your
what's
clothes
going
and your
on.
shoes, all those things that you think you can control, but they're controlling you. Really is.
I think for me, what's helping me through this is, even from a young age, I always looked at older women and looked forward to becoming older, and I didn't know what happened between 40 and 60. It never occurred to me, maybe even 30 and 60, but after 60, I knew that I was going to wear whatever the fuck I wanted and garden, or tell people off, or just be that woman,
Okay, I can wear whatever the fuck I want, okay? If you're asking, what's it like to be there? And that planet of 60, yes, I can wear whatever the fuck I want, pretty much, unless there's a certain kind of occasion, then I still get nervous again, and I think, oh God, I have to do something that's at least appropriate, not conventional necessarily, but appropriate to the occasion. But I still don't have, and some things I can tell people to fuck off, certain situations, but I still am dealing with similar issues that I had when I was 20, when I was 30, when I was 40, that I still haven't completely coped with. But I will tell you that those issues are clearer to me than just the immediate sort of brain fog and fear that comes in. The brain fog and the fear are behind me. So now I'm looking at those things and saying, okay, these are my dragons and my demons. What I really should do is shake hands with them, and and make them my friends, instead of this tyrannical thing. And that has started to kick in. But as I said, I think the circumstances that I'm in, which I never dreamed I would be in, that are positive. I always thought, woe is me, and I'm going to be alone, and everything's going to be terrible. And so I'm not alone, and things are not terrible. Those things are very supportive of being able to take your demons and imagine them as friends.
And I think, for me anyway, what's helping is looking at women such as yourself, and being able to see your skin and see beauty in that, And the more that I fall in love with you and your beauty, the more comfortable I am moving into that stage. You know?
Yes, I get inspired by women that are older than me.
Yeah.
I definitely, there were some, I just thought, oh my God, if I could be like that person, it'll be okay. But you don't know, if you sat down and talked to that woman and interviewed her in a podcast, she might tell you all kinds of things.
Yeah.
That
But isn't it amazing how hard we are on ourselves? But yet I see so much beauty, and I'm so grateful that your skin is how it is, because if there were no examples of women who didn't stuff themselves with, foreign objects in their faces, I don't, what would I do?
I think that's true. I think it's, we wear, most of the women, I mean, and when you see people on the red carpet, that's a lot of surgery, generally. You can see it. I mean, now we know what all that stuff, we know exactly what those procedures are, and we're seeing them. It is distressing. So what you're doing right now to me is inspiring, and you're inspiring other women by just letting your hair grow out and letting it be naturally what it is at this time for you. So that's all I think that's all we can do is try to enjoy those examples. I mean, look what Patti Smith did. She sort of plucked the hairs off the front, the little mustache and the lady beard stuff. She went all gray. She's a little more, I'll call it grooming, but minor and appropriate grooming, looking her age. Yeah. And she's beautiful.
Yeah.
So there are examples, but unfortunately most of the examples are in Hollywood. Hollywood examples are generally not quite there yet. I can't think of another. Can you think of an actor or an actress really that is authentically 60s or 70s and is still, hasn't ironed her face basically?
Even the thing that blows my mind is when I started doing research into the gray hair, 30% of women, or 32% of women under the age of 30 are going gray.
Wow. I didn't know that. Or anything like that. I wouldn't have.
It's changed. It's actually it used to be 18%, and now it's 32%. So something's going on environmentally for us, but...
everything. Puberty is much shorter.
75% of women dye their hair. So it's a giant lie, essentially, that we're all upholding with the skin and the hair and whatever. And as a group, we're not allowing anyone to stop dressing like money or stop dyeing their hair, or, women need to be okay with the secret getting out in order for us to be able to break through this, And I had this one woman yesterday notice I had a hairband, so it was the demarcation was gray and then red, and she just couldn't, she was staring at me with this look of almost disgust and treachery. I had my sunglasses on, so she couldn't see that I was looking at her, and I almost wanted to stop and be like, are you okay? Yes, I'm doing this on purpose.
You see, what it is, because you didn't let it all go gray, or there's because it shows that you're dyeing it every 3 weeks. You're making a choice, a very conscious choice. You're not hiding it in any way at all. It's not like you haven't gotten to the hairdresser. You're definitely doing something. Yeah. It looks like you're doing something. But I think it's great, and I think that, it's too bad if you saw somebody who wasn't applauding you. But maybe you didn't see all the women who were applauding.
I do feel that. I see that on the streets, and a lot of younger women that I've been talking to about it are so grateful. And they're like, I can't wait to be gray, and I hope that I look like you when I'm 43.
I think women, not all of them, of course, but women who are younger are definitely hoping for a different world, where their voices are valued, where they participate equally. The tyranny over appearance becomes less significant, certainly, than it is now. I think there is a glimmer of a different future in terms of gender and our experience. So I think that there is some optimism. I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic too.
I am optimistic and delusional, and therefore am going to create that new paradigm for myself, even if it means I have to create my own network to put my own shows on,
Yeah.
Like whatever that
Sure.
looks like, I'm going to do it because I want to keep working.
Then that's the way to be,
Mm-hmm.
because if it's what you want, then do it, go after it, make it possible. And and also I think what you're doing has such value, and it's something that certainly is on every woman's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we need support for things to be more fair,
Yeah.
and more realistic. We're all here. We all have an expiration date. We're all going to age. That's it. So, Wabi-Sabi. There, it's like value the aftermath of the perfectly bloomed flower, and what that process is as it changes, as time continues to progress, as long as it's allowed to be a flower.
That's so beautiful. What a perfect way to end.
Ah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nancy.
thank you. I love this topic.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'll have you back
there's
again.
plenty more.
Once I figure out what I'm doing with this podcast, I'll have you back for sure. Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
You're gonna hold me down. I said, I'm going gray in Tinseltown. There's no way you're gonna hold me down, 'cause I was born to entertain. And you can't take that away. I'm going gray all in your face. You can't replace this. It's going down, we're going gray in Tinseltown.